I am now here in the MessageGears platform to show you what Engage looks like. Now, here I am connected to my on-premise data source. This is a Google BigQuery database that I've set up, but I can be connected to any on-premise or cloud-native database, such as Snowflake, Amazon Redshift, or even a simple MySQL database. I can see all of my tables here to see what my data looks like, and I've actually written a query to get some of my data together. In this example, I'm going to be using a user profile table that has all of my information about my users, a hashed customer identifier, their name, their loyalty status, how many points they've earned with me, and then the items that we are suggesting for them to buy. Now, in this example, we are simply listing out a few items along with that item information for Movable Ink to then use in their creative. Now, this would typically be in multiple tables, that disparate data that I was talking about earlier. But in this example, for expediency's sake, we've gone ahead and made it into a single table with all of my data. Now, I can see this data. I'm selecting it here using a simple SQL query. And my next step is to schedule it. Now, what I'm doing here is scheduling how often that data is going to be promoted and refreshed within the MessageGears environment. So for our example today, I'm going to be doing a full replace of this data every 8 hours. That means every 8 hours, I'm going to extract all of my data from my database and upload it to MessageGears and promote it to be fresh. But in the meantime, I'm going to be doing incremental refreshes. So every 15 minutes, I'm going to select all of the new data that has flowed into that table and promote it up to MessageGears. This is to ensure that the data is always fresh because that data should always be changing. And it's to ensure that I have a low strain on my database. So by selecting only the last 15 minutes of data, I'm not having to do a full table scan and a full table extract on every query. Now, I just want to have a quick reminder that while I'm replacing this data, there is zero downtime. So that data is always available to Movable Ink and will always be there because having that data-driven creative, it's important that that data have as much availability as you can. Now, I've got my data. I've scheduled it to replace. And what I'm going to do is go to this examples tab where we actually give you in our UI here, the example URL you're going to use as a data source in Movable Ink that Bill's going to show you in a minute. You can see here it's coming from Engage and I can copy to my clipboard. But one thing I want to focus on is the fact that this data is authenticated. So I've actually given Movable Ink access to this data and sent Bill an authorization key offline. I just wanted to touch on that because it's important that we do know that this is your data and it does need to be secure. Bill will show how to authenticate from the Movable Ink side in a second. But I've set up my data. I've got my data source that I can turn around and send to Bill. And now I'm going to let Bill show you in Movable Ink what using Engage to create creative looks like.
All right, so Nick has delivered the MessageGears Engage API endpoint to me. And what I'll show you today is just how easy it is to connect that to Movable Ink's data sources and build data-activated content via that data set. Before we do that, just wanted to give you a quick look at what exactly we'll be building out. So as Nick mentioned, the data set that he produced within Engage has product recommendations for each individual user in that data set. So right now I'm in Movable Ink's preview screen looking at some product tiles that I've set up. And these can kind of be thought of as the default content or fallback content. So if there are no recommended products identified for the user, we can always serve up some sort of content for the individual. However, if we were to target this towards an individual, it's just as simple as merging in a unique user ID into the MessageGears API. So I'll just merge that into my preview panel. And what's happening here is we're taking that unique user ID and calling out to the Engage API and returning all of the product recommendations for that individual. It's also bringing in metadata about that product, so the product title, the image, the price, and even understanding real-time inventory. So really powerful stuff. That's what we'll be building today. And let's take a look at how that's done. So what we'll do, we'll hop over to Movable Ink's data sources page. You can think of Movable Ink's data sources as a connector for any external or internal API that you might have. So This might be something that your company has built out through its own IT resources, or it might be something that you have through a partner or a MarTech vendor, such as MessageGears Engage. So we're going to create a new data source here. And you'll see there's three options. We can upload a CSV file. We can tap directly into the front of the website in most cases. But in this case, we'll be importing that Engage API. So go ahead and click Next. I can give this a name. I'll just call it MG Demo. And we'll take that endpoint that Nick provided and we'll paste it into the endpoint field here. So I have a demo parameter here, or a dynamic parameter of MG Demo ID. That's just really asking for a unique user ID to call the API. And there's just one more step to get a valid response. As Nick mentioned, this particular endpoint was specific to Movable Inc., and therefore it has a specific authorization token. So what I will do is enter that authorization token as a header within the custom settings within data sources. So really flexible in how we can authenticate within Movable Inc. We can either do a bearer token, a user name and password, or we can pass things in through the header if required. And once we do that, we have a valid response coming in from that API. So from here, what I can do is hit Next, and it's going to bring us into step 3, where we're able to add data fields from the API response. So you can see over here on the left-hand side, all of those fields that are associated with this particular user ID. So we have things like first name, last name, loyalty status, and points, and then all of the recommended products and metadata for that individual. So this really easy to use graphic interface allows you to map these fields into the Movable Inc. platform. So if I wanted to add first name, last name, loyalty status, they just come over into the right-hand side, and they're called a certain thing within MessageGears. We can label them whatever we want within Movable Inc. So we could do this for all of the fields in this response, one-time setup, and then it's going to be dynamic for the rest of the users once we merge in an individual user ID.
And that's a good point, Bill, that even if the variables that you have in your on-premise data source are named something, you can absolutely update them, whether it be in Engage or here in the Movable Inc. UI. And a question I'm actually not even sure if I know the answer to. I had talked about, I know that in Engage, you can create multiple data sources and effectively join that data. Are you limited to a single API call here per data source?
Great question. So the answer is no. In Movable Inc., we can connect to multiple data sources, so we can actually create subsequent API calls. For instance, if we wanted to, if a SKU, for instance, was coming through here instead of all of the product metadata, and we only had, item 1, 2, 3, now we needed to call a subsequent API for the metadata for that particular product. We could absolutely string API calls together in order to create that content and compile those data sources. Not going to get into that today, but definitely a good call out, Nick.
Yeah. Just from our perspective, that's great, because kind of to what I talked to in the slide, so often I see that as the case, that you might have offer data somewhere, user data somewhere else, and then as we're seeing here, inventory data in a third place. Just having that ability to join them all into a single message is huge, I think. For
sure. All right, so I'm not going to waste everyone's time by mapping all of these fields and actually setting this up, since magically in a cooking show fashion, I have a data source all set up to use here. What I can do is actually bring that data set that I've mapped into Movable Inc. Studio. So I've moved over to Movable Inc.'s homepage here, and I'm just going to create a new campaign. We can give this campaign a name, and we're going to choose the channel that we're working on. So, for this example, we're going to choose email, but This integration would work in all of our channels. So you'll see email, web, mobile, in-app messaging. All of this is fair game. Kind of works the same way through the same user interfaces within the email channel that we're going to show you. It would be set up pretty much exactly the same within all of the channels. So I'll choose email. I'll give this this block a name of product 1, and I'll add that block. So I'm in a new content block, and the first step with any content block is going to be to add some content. And when I click in there, it brings us into our media library and app gallery. So the media library is a repository for all of your images. And then underneath that, you have all of our out-of-the-box applications that are open to use. For this demo, we'll choose the data sources application, which brings us into Movable Ink Studio. So to kind of set the stage here, Movable Ink Studio is a drag and drop design editor. If you've ever been in Photoshop, if you've ever been in PowerPoint, it should be pretty easy to use. We have a layered list over here on the left-hand side. We have a blank canvas in the middle, and then we have our properties on the right-hand side. So the first step with any data source is to choose the actual source of that data. So I'll choose the webinar demo data that I've mapped previously. You can see that it's installing it into this Studio app. And once that's installed, now we can use all of the fields that I've mapped to Studio in this creative. So I'll go ahead and bring in a dynamic image. When I double click on that, we can choose where that image is coming from. So I'll choose the data source, and since I have 3 products per individual, I have 3 images. I'm doing product 1, so I'll choose that image. And just want to call out here, as with every piece of content in Movable Ink, you always have a fallback capability. So if we are, if ever there's a reason why a product comes through without an image, we can choose a fallback experience so that the end user never sees a broken experience. We'll save that out. And then we can add in text fields, we can add in URLs, anything that we wanted to add from that API response is now accessible via these dropdowns. So I will go ahead and add in the item title here and save that out. One other call out on Studio, if we wanted to design this to a very specific template guideline, that's very easy within Movable Ink as well. So we are rendering out images at the end of the day, which means that we're not limited to web-safe fonts. We can really design this however your creative team likes. Any fonts, colors, spacing, sizing, that's all fair game within Movable Ink because the output is an image at the end of the day. Again, in true cooking show fashion, I will skip over to a created content block here. I have it sized to meet Nick's guidelines for his particular template, and I have it designed with all of his fonts and colors as well. But you know what? Why don't I adjust the font of this product title? Remember, since Movable Ink is rendering images, we're not limited to web-safe fonts. So I'll adjust the title of this product to be a creative font, something that wouldn't be able to be accomplished in standard system or HTML text, and then I'll save it to send over to Nick. Last thing I wanted to show within Movable Ink, once I close out of this, is how we're actually getting the user ID over to Movable Ink. So if you remember from the data source that we mapped, we had a dynamic parameter. All we need is the merge tag from your ESP. In this case, it's MessageGears. So this is the MessageGears recipient customer ID code, which will be replaced at time of send. But this could be any ESP's merge tag for unique user ID. It just needs to match up with whatever user ID is being used within the engaged product. From here, I can just go ahead and click Finish and Export to get Movable Ink's embed codes. Each product tile that I've set up has its own embed code, and these are just going to be copy and pasted and sent out to your ESP, which will be pasted into your template wherever that content block should go. So from here, I'll send these over to Nick, and he'll show us how it actually gets implemented in the actual email creative.
All right, thank you, Bill. So far we have configured our engaged data source to get that live data. Bill just show you how you can use Movable Ink to make data activated creative using that engaged data. What I'm going to do now is take that that creative that Bill just made and show you how to plug it into a template to make this live. So what I'm going to show you here is in the MessageGears platform. This is our template editor, our drag and drop email template editor. But just to go back to what Bill said, this can be done using any ESP. So you don't have to be sending messages through MessageGears for Engage to work. No matter who's sending your messages or really on what channel they are, this Engage data is live and can be used to make that content. So as you can see here, I've got my email template for our City and Glory brand. We've got a few personalized images here, and then those Movable Ink creative pieces that Bill just showed. I've created an HTML block, and what I can do is just paste that link that Bill just sent to me. And what I'm going to do is preview what these mailings or these templates would be looking like. So again, I'm in the MessageGears preview dynamic personalization area of the app. And what I'm going to do is I can cycle through what potential recipients would see in their mailing. So it's like receiving this mailing live. So we've got our friend Skipper here, who would be suggested to get the writing desk and the nightstand and the ceramic lamp. But then I could scroll to our friend Chelsea Escort, who would be recommended the serving plate with the oak chair and the flatware set. So, you know, like Bill had mentioned, you could see that this is styled. And it's really drawing in a few pieces of data here. So we've got, you know, the item name, but also, like he had focused on the image, and then we've got inventory and a little bit of pricing info. At this point, when you're presenting the template or you're presenting the message, it really doesn't matter whether that data came from one source or many sources. We're able to bring it here together to make a single, powerful image. So what I'm going to do here in true demo fashion is, while in a typical example, data would be flowing over time, and that would be changing for the user, I'm actually going to just select from a different data source here, and then publish and promote that data to show you what it would look like over time as the data is changing.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, with Movable Ink, we'll be calling that data at the moment of engagement. So the second that email is opened, we're making a call out to the Engage platform. So if something changes from the time the email is sent to the time that the email is opened, we're always going to have that up-to-date info from Engage, as Nick's showing here.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And then I just noticed something I missed when I was showing this page before. We have a TTL here. That's a time to live. So this data should be always changing. This is live data. This is dynamic data. And MessageGears doesn't want to hold on to your data for any longer than it is relevant. So I'm actually specifying how many hours, in this case, any data is going to be relevant, after which we're going to make a new call to get new data. So here, I think I've set this to a few weeks just for our demo. But this is to ensure that whether your data is good for a month, or whether that user level data is truly changing every day and is only good for a day or a few hours, we're always getting the newest, most relevant data. Now, if I go back to my personalization tab and jump between recipients, I could see now that where I was suggesting the writing desk for Skipper, I now have my oak chair and an ottoman and ultra soft pillows with updated inventory information, because in this example, maybe Skipper's has purchased something, maybe he is in a different location near a different store. The reasons for recommending these different images could be anything. And you could see that for chairs, we now have the dining bench, the lamp, and the shelf. This could be due to any number of factors, but just to show that the data is live and it's always changing. And to Bill's point, it's at the time of open. So that can be configured within Movable Ink, when it goes and gets that data. But this is just an example of what that live data would look like. So just to recap here, I was able to show you how setting up an Engage data source is easy and connects right to your data. Talk through that promotion and how to make that data live for Movable Ink. Bill then walked through how to create the moving images using that live data. And here we are in a template in MessageGears again, although it could be any ESP, seeing what those images look like.